When my greedy daughter-in-law said I wasn't welcome at the Mother's Day celebration, their mortgage check was cancelled, by me. She kicked me out. When my greedy daughter-in-law said I wasn't welcome at the Mother's Day celebration, their mortgage check was cancelled by me. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The message from Fiona arrived on Wednesday afternoon, 3 days before Mother's Day. I was in my kitchen, arranging flowers I'd picked from my garden. My phone chimed with her name, and I felt that familiar knot in my stomach tighten, the one that always appeared when my daughter-in-law contacted me. Barbara, Thomas and I have decided to keep Mother's Day intimate this year, just immediate family. Hope you understand. I read the text 3 times, my fingers trembling. Immediate family. The words cut through me like shards of glass. After 5 years of marriage to my son, Fiona still didn't consider me immediate family. I set my phone down and gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady my breathing. For 3 years I'd been helping them with their mortgage payments, $100 to $600 a month that stretched my retirement savings thin. Money I'd gladly given to help them establish themselves, to give Thomas the foundation I'd always wanted for him. My phone rang. Thomas, Mom, he started. His voice strained in that way it always was when Fiona was nearby. Did you get Fiona's message? Yes. I managed to keep my voice even. I was just wondering what immediate family means if not your mother. A pause. I could hear him cover the phone, murmuring to someone. Fiona, no doubt. When he returned, his voice was firmer. Fiona's parents are coming over. We thought it would be nice to have just the 4 of us this year. The betrayal stung sharper than I expected. I see. And I'm not considered immediate family, but her parents are? Mom, don't make this difficult. Thomas sighed. Fiona thinks, we think, it would be better this way. You and Fiona have been tense lately. Tense. What a polite way to describe how my daughter-in-law rolled her eyes whenever I spoke. How she'd accidentally left me off family email chains. How she'd made comments about my clothes, my hair, my opinions. Will you still need the mortgage check this month? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Of course, Thomas responded quickly. Why wouldn't we? I closed my eyes, feeling something break inside me. Just checking. I'll mail it tomorrow. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the check I'd already written. 3 years of checks. 3 years of inviting them for Sunday dinners they rarely attended. 3 years of birthday and Christmas gifts that were acknowledged with obligatory thank you texts. 3 years of watching Fiona slowly erase me from my son's life. That evening I received another text from Fiona. Just so you know, we're having a proper Mother's Day celebration with my mom. I hope you're not too upset about our decision. It's just that Thomas and I feel more comfortable this way. You can sometimes be a bit overwhelming. Overwhelming. The word echoed in my mind as tears burned my eyes. Was it overwhelming to love your child, to want to be part of their life? I picked up the mortgage check again, running my finger along the edge. Then with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, I tore it in half. Then quarters. Then eighths. I dropped the pieces into my shredder and watched them disappear. My hands shook, but not from sadness, from resolve. If I wasn't family enough to be included on Mother's Day, then perhaps I wasn't family enough to pay their mortgage. The next morning, I called the bank and canceled the automatic payment I had scheduled. The customer service representative asked if there was a problem. No, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in months. I've just realized it's time for some changes. When I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of guilt and liberation. For the first time in years I had chosen myself. The weight of constantly trying to earn Fiona's approval, of pretending her subtle cruelties didn't hurt, suddenly lifted from my shoulders. I knew there would be consequences. Thomas would be furious. Fiona would have another reason to paint me as the difficult mother-in-law. But as I looked at the empty space where the check had been, I realized I couldn't continue financing my own exclusion. 3 days later, on Mother's Day, I turned off my phone and spent the day planting new flowers in my garden. With each seed I tucked into the soil, I made a promise to myself. No more shrinking, no more apologizing for existing, no more financing people who didn't value me. Little did I know that by sundown, my peaceful act of self-respect would unleash a storm that would change our family forever. The first call came at 7:42 a.m. on Monday. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the porch when Thomas's name flashed across my screen. I let it ring. 10 minutes later, he called again. By the third call, I knew I couldn't avoid the inevitable confrontation any longer. Hello, Thomas, I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. Mom, what the hell? His voice was strained, anger barely contained. The bank called. They said the mortgage payment bounced. Did you cancel your check? I took a slow sip of my coffee before responding. Yes, I did. What? Why would you? He stopped abruptly, and I heard muffled voices. Fiona in the background, no doubt. When he returned, his tone had hardened. Is this because of Mother's Day? Are you seriously that petty? The accusation stung, but I held firm. This isn't about pettiness, Thomas. This is about respect. For 3 years I've helped you with your mortgage. I've given you over $50,000 while Fiona has systematically pushed me out of your life. That's not fair, he shot back. Fiona hasn't, Thomas, I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. Your wife told me I wasn't welcome on Mother's Day because I'm overwhelming. She invited her parents instead. If I'm not family enough to celebrate Mother's Day with you, then perhaps I'm not family enough to pay your mortgage. Silence hung between us for a moment before he spoke again, his voice lower. This is really disappointing, Mom. I never thought you'd use money to manipulate us. His words hit like a physical blow. Manipulate, is that what you think I've been doing all these years, supporting you? Fiona thinks. I don't care what Fiona thinks anymore, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I care. What you think, Thomas. What do you think about excluding your mother from Mother's Day? Another pause. I think you're overreacting. It was just one day. It's not just one day, I said, my voice breaking slightly. It's a pattern, and I'm done financing my own exclusion. I ended the call before he could respond, my hands trembling as I sat down the phone. The peaceful morning I'd planned was shattered, but I didn't regret my decision. By noon the text messages started. Fiona, real mature Barbara. Using money as a weapon just proves why we wanted space from you. Fiona, Thomas is devastated by your behavior. Is this really the kind of mother you want to be, Thomas? Mom, please call me back. We need to fix this. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I busied myself with gardening, trying to lose myself in the rhythm of digging and planting, but the peace I sought eluded me. Around 3 p.m. my doorbell rang. I peered through the peephole to see Thomas and Fiona standing on my porch, both looking thunderous. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. We need to talk, Thomas said, brushing past me without waiting for an invitation. Fiona followed, her eyes scanning my living room with thinly veiled disdain. Yes, we do, I agreed, closing the door and turning to face them. Would you like some tea? We don't want tea, Fiona snapped. We want an explanation, and for you to fix this mess you've created. I looked at my son, searching his face for any sign of the boy I'd raised. The one who once brought me dandelions and called them flowers, who held my hand at his father's funeral, and promised we'd always take care of each other. All I saw was a man who couldn't meet my eyes. I've already explained, I said calmly. I won't continue to financially support people who don't respect me. This isn't about respect. Fiona's voice rose. This is about you trying to control us. You've always wanted to control Thomas, and you can't stand that he has me now. That's not true, I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger bubbling inside me. I've never tried to control either of you. I've only wanted to be treated with basic courtesy and inclusion. You call barging into our lives and criticizing everything I do basic courtesy? Fiona shot back. I blinked, genuinely confused. When have I ever criticized you, Fiona? You do it all the time. The way you look at our house, how you ask about our finances, your comments about my cooking. I've never said a negative word about your cooking? I protested. You don't have to say it, it's your expression, the way you pick at your food. I turned to Thomas, desperate for him to see reason. Thomas? You know that's not true. He shifted uncomfortably. Mom, you can be critical sometimes. Maybe not directly, but his words trailed off, and I felt a chill settle over me. This was what Fiona had done, twisted my actions, reframed my words until even my own son saw me as the villain in their story. I think you should both leave, I said quietly. Not until you agree to reinstate the mortgage payment, Fiona demanded. Looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly saw everything clearly. The subtle manipulation, the way she'd positioned herself between Thomas and me, the calculated effort to isolate him from his family. No, I said. The word carrying, the weight of years of silent acquiescence. The answer is no. You'll regret this, Fiona hissed, grabbing her purse. Come on, Thomas, she's made her choice. Thomas hesitated, looking torn. Mom, please. We can work this out. Yes, we can, I agreed. But not like this, not with threats and accusations. Fine, he said finally, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Have it your way. As they left, slamming the door behind them, I didn't cry. Instead, I felt a strange, calm certainty settling over me. The worst had happened. My son had chosen his wife over me, and I had survived. What I didn't know then was that the real battle was just beginning. That evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. My sister had tagged me in a Facebook post. With trembling fingers, I opened it to find a lengthy message from Fiona, detailing how I had abandoned my son in his time of need, how I was using money to control him, how I had always been jealous of their relationship. The family war had gone public. By the end of the week, I had 37 missed calls, 62 text messages, and countless social media notifications. Fiona's post had spread through our extended family like wildfire, with people taking sides without even hearing my version of events. I'd turned off my notifications, unable to bear the constant judgment. My sister Janet was the only one who called to hear my side. "This doesn't sound like you, Barb," she'd said. "What really happened?" After I explained, she sighed deeply. "I always thought there was something off about Fiona. Too perfect, too polished." "I just don't understand how Thomas can't see it," I said, my voice breaking. "He's always been such a good judge of character." "Love blinds people," Janet replied, "and manipulators like Fiona are experts at isolation. It's textbook." Her words stayed with me as I tried to go about my days. Textbook manipulation. Was that what I'd been experiencing all these years? On Saturday morning, I found myself pulling boxes from the attic. Photo albums, holiday cards, old emails I'd printed. I spread them across the living room floor, creating a timeline of my relationship with Thomas and Fiona. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. In the first year after they started dating, Thomas called me several times a week. We had Sunday dinners regularly. He brought Fiona to family gatherings, and though she was never warm with me, she was polite. Then came their engagement. The calls became less frequent. Sunday dinners dwindled to once a month, then special occasions only. Thomas began to cancel plans last minute. I found a Christmas card from 3 years ago, the first Christmas after they were married. "Mom, we're so blessed to have your support. Love you always, Thomas and Fiona." The same year, they asked for help with the mortgage, claiming they were struggling to make ends meet. I pulled out my financial records next. The mortgage payments, $600 each month. But there were other expenses too, helping with their car, insurance, paying for home repairs, covering the property taxes last year when they claimed they were short. All while Fiona posted pictures of their new furniture, their weekend trips, the designer clothes she just couldn't resist. I'd seen the posts and felt uneasy, but I dismissed my concerns. They were young, enjoying life. I wanted Thomas to have the things I couldn't give him growing up as a single mother. But now, looking at it all laid out chronologically, a pattern emerged that I couldn't ignore. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. An unknown number against my better judgment, I answered. "Barbara?" "It's Claire, Fiona's sister." I stiffened. Claire and I had met only a handful of times at family gatherings. She'd always seemed uncomfortable around Fiona, staying on the periphery of conversations. "Claire," I said cautiously, "how did you get my number?" "From Thomas's old contact list. Look, I don't have much time, but I saw Fiona's Facebook post, and I couldn't stay silent." Something in her voice, a tremor of fear perhaps, made me pay attention. "What do you mean?" "Fiona's done this before," Claire said, her words coming in a rush. "With our stepfather, she manipulated our mother into thinking he was controlling and negative, always criticizing. Mom eventually asked him to move out. It tore our family apart." I sank onto the couch, my heart pounding. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've seen how she isolates people, twists their words, creates false narratives, and then she uses them financially, emotionally, however she can, until they're not useful anymore." My mind raced back to all the subtle comments, the way Fiona would rephrase my words when telling Thomas, making innocent questions sound like criticism. "There's more," Claire continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Check Thomas's email if you can. 3 months ago, Fiona was planning a surprise anniversary party for you both. Thomas asked me to help, but then suddenly, it was cancelled, and Fiona told everyone you had declined the invitation, saying you were too busy." My throat tightened. "I never received an invitation." "I know, because there never was one. Fiona made it up, told Thomas she'd called you that you weren't interested in celebrating with them." Tears burned my eyes as pieces started falling into place. Forgotten invitations, misunderstood conversations, times when Thomas seemed hurt by something I supposedly said or did. "Why would she do this?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Control," Claire said simply. "And your money." "Thomas mentioned once that you helped them with the mortgage. Is that true?" "Yes," I admitted. "For 3 years now. That explains a lot. Fiona's always looking for financial support. She did the same with our stepfather, asked for money constantly, then turned around and told our mother he was trying to control her through his handouts." We talked for another 20 minutes, Claire filling in gaps in the narrative I'd been trying to piece together. When we finally hung up, I sat among the scattered evidence of years of manipulation, my mind reeling. I hadn't cancelled that check out of pettiness or revenge. Some part of me had sensed what was happening all along, had finally reached its breaking point. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Mom, we need to talk, just you and me, please." I stared at the message, feeling both hope and dread. Was he finally seeing the truth? Or was this another trap orchestrated by Fiona? Either way, I knew I couldn't ignore it. This was my son, the little boy I'd raised. Alone, the young man who'd once looked at me, with nothing but love and respect in his eyes. Tomorrow, I typed back, my house, 2 p.m. As I sent the message, I began gathering the evidence spread across my floor. Tomorrow, Thomas would hear the truth, whether he was ready for it or not. At exactly 2:03 p.m., Thomas's car pulled into my driveway. I watched from the window as he sat there for a moment, his forehead resting against the steering wheel. When he finally emerged, his shoulders were hunched, his movements hesitant, so unlike the confident young man I'd raised. I opened the door before he could knock. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Thomas paused at the threshold, eyes scanning. The living room where I'd arranged the evidence of Fiona's manipulation, photos, financial records, text messages printed out and organized chronologically. "What is all this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The truth," I replied. "Please sit down." He lowered himself onto the couch, looking lost in the home where he'd grown up. I noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the rumpled shirt, signs that he wasn't sleeping well. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered, falling back on hospitality to ease the tension. He shook his head. "Mom, I need to understand why you canceled the mortgage payment. We're struggling. The bank is threatening." "Are you really struggling, Thomas?" I interrupted, my voice gentle but firm. I handed him a folder containing their social media posts from the last 3 months. "Because according to Fiona's Instagram, you just took a weekend trip to Napa. You bought new living room furniture. Fiona has 3 new designer handbags." He flipped through the printouts, his brow furrowing. Those were special occasions. The trip was a work thing, the furniture was on sale. And these, I handed him my financial records. 3 years of mortgage payments, home repairs, property taxes, car insurance, all while you two were supposedly struggling. Thomas set the papers down, running a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think. We had a plan to pay you back eventually." "This isn't about paying me back," I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. "It's about respect, Thomas. It's about being treated like family, not an ATM machine." His eyes flashed with anger. "That's not fair. We've always appreciated." "Have you?" I asked quietly. "Because from where I'm sitting, appreciation looks a lot different than being excluded from Mother's Day, while my money is still welcome." He fell silent, unable to meet my eyes. "Thomas," I continued, my voice softening, "I received a call from Claire yesterday." His head snapped up, surprise evident on his face. "Fiona's sister? Why would she call you?" "Because she's seen this pattern before with their stepfather." I recounted my conversation with Claire, watching as Thomas's expression shifted from disbelief to confusion to dawning realization. When I told him about the anniversary party that never existed, he paled visibly. "That can't be right," he muttered. "Fiona told me she called you. She said you were too busy, that you had a spa day planned with Janet." "I never received that call, Thomas, and I haven't been to a spa in years." He stood abruptly, pacing the living room, stopping occasionally to examine a piece of evidence, the timeline of cancelled plans, the record of financial support, the text messages between Fiona and her friends where she referred to me as the cash cow. "I don't understand," he said finally, his voice breaking. "Why would she do this?" "People who manipulate others do it, for control," I explained gently, "and sometimes for financial gain." Thomas sank back onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I've been such a fool." My heart ached for him. Despite everything, he was still my son, and seeing him in pain was almost unbearable. I sat beside him, placing a tentative hand on his shoulder. "You're not a fool, Thomas. Manipulative people are incredibly skilled at what they do. They isolate their targets, rewrite narratives, create division. It's not your fault." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "But I believed her over my own mother. How can you ever forgive me for that?" I squeezed his shoulder. "There's nothing to forgive. You loved her. You trusted her. That's what good people do." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of revelation hanging heavy between us. Finally, Thomas spoke again, his voice steadier. "What happens now?" It was the question I'd been asking myself all night. What did happen now? Could our relationship be repaired? Could Thomas see his way out of Fiona's manipulation? "That depends on you," I said carefully. "I can't tell you what to do about your marriage, that's your decision. But I can tell you that I'm setting boundaries from now on. I won't be financing your lifestyle anymore, not because I don't love you, but because it's not healthy for either of us." He nodded slowly. "I understand, and I wouldn't ask that of you again." He paused, swallowing hard. "I need to talk to Fiona, confront her with what I know." A flash of fear went through me. "Be careful, Thomas. When manipulators are exposed, they often become volatile." "What choice do I have?" he asked, his eyes meeting mine. "I can't continue living a lie." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. "It's Fiona. She's been tracking my location through my phone. She wants to know why I'm here. What will you tell her?" Thomas stood. a new resolve in his posture. The truth, that I'm talking to my mother, that I've seen the evidence of her manipulation, that things are going to change. His phone buzzed again, more insistently this time, then again, and again. She's calling now, he said, showing me the screen. I should take this outside. I nodded, watching as he stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. Through the window, I could see his back straighten as he answered, could see his free hand gesturing emphatically as he spoke. After a few minutes he ended the call and stood motionless, staring out at the street. When he came back inside, his face was pale but determined. She's coming over, he said. She says there's been a misunderstanding, that she can explain everything. My stomach twisted with anxiety. Do you want me to be here for that conversation? Thomas took a deep breath, then nodded. Yes, it's time we all face the truth together. As we waited for Fiona to arrive, I prepared myself for the confrontation ahead. I wasn't naive enough to think this would end neatly or painlessly. But for the first time in years, I felt like my son and I were standing on the same side. The sound of squealing tires announced Fiona's arrival before we saw her car. Fiona burst through my front door without knocking, her perfectly styled hair, slightly disheveled, her eyes wild with anger. She froze when she saw the evidence spread across my living room, the financial records, the timeline of her manipulations, the screenshots of her social media posts. What is this? She demanded, her voice shrill. Her gaze darted between Thomas and me. What have you been telling him? Thomas stood, his posture rigid. The truth, Fiona, or at least what I've been able to piece together. The truth? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean her warped version of events? Thomas, you know how your mother twists things. I remained seated, watching as she employed the tactics Claire had described: deflection, projection, gaslighting. I talked to your sister, Thomas said quietly. Fiona's expression flickered, surprise, then fury. Claire? That backstabbing little. She stopped herself, composing her features into a mask of hurt. Claire has always been jealous of me. Whatever, she said, is a lie. Is this a lie? Thomas asked, holding up a printout of text messages between Fiona and her friend. Messages where she referred to me as the cash cow, and boasted about how she'd trained Thomas to choose her over his mother. Fiona's face paled. Where did you get those? Claire sent them to your mother. Apparently you two share an iCloud account. She's seen everything, Fiona. For a moment, Fiona seemed at a loss for words, then her expression hardened. So what? So I vented to my friends. Everyone does that. Vented? Thomas repeated incredulously. You literally wrote, and I quote, Barbara, we'll keep paying the mortgage as long as we pretend to care about her. Once the house is paid off, we can cut her off completely. Fiona's eyes narrowed dangerously. You had no right to go through my private messages, and you had no right to manipulate my relationship with my mother, Thomas shot back, his voice rising. You had no right to lie about calls and invitations, to twist her words, to use her financially, while systematically pushing her out of our lives. Fiona's demeanor suddenly shifted. Tears welled in her eyes, and her shoulders slumped. I was just trying to protect our marriage, she whispered. Your mother has always hated me, always tried to come between us. I finally spoke up, my voice calm. That's not true, Fiona. I welcomed you into our family. I supported you both financially and emotionally. All I ever wanted was to be included in your lives. She rounded on me, the vulnerable act vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. You think your money gives you the right to control us, to dictate how we live? My mother never tried to control us, Thomas interjected. She was helping us at our request. She canceled the mortgage payment. Fiona snapped. If that's not control, what is? It's a boundary, I said simply. One I should have said a long time ago. Fiona's face contorted with rage. You've turned him against me, she hissed. You and Claire and your lies. No one needed to turn me against you, Thomas said wearily. You did that yourself with every manipulation, every lie, every time you tried to erase my mother from our lives while still taking her money. Fiona's gaze darted around the room like a cornered animal looking for escape. This is ridiculous. I'm leaving. She turned to Thomas. Are you coming? The question hung in the air between them. A simple query that carried the weight of their entire marriage. Thomas took a deep breath. No, Fiona, I'm not. The three words seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Fiona's eyes widened in disbelief. You're choosing her over me after everything we've built together? I'm choosing the truth, Thomas replied, his voice steady for the first time since arriving. And the truth is, our marriage was built on lies, your lies. Fiona took a step back as if physically struck by his words. Then her expression hardened into something cold and calculating. Fine, she spat. Stay with Mommy, but don't think this is over. She pointed a manicured finger at me. And you'll regret this. With that she stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the windows rattled. The sound of her car starting and speeding away broke the heavy silence she left behind. Thomas collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I can't believe I didn't see it," he murmured, "all this time, right in front of me." I sat beside him, placing a gentle hand on his back. "Don't blame yourself. She's very good at what she does." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "What happens now?" It was a complicated question with no easy answer. "That's up to you," I said carefully. "But whatever you decide, I want you to know that I'm here for you. Even after everything, after I believed her over you, after I let her push you away? You're my son," I said simply. "That hasn't changed." The next few weeks were a blur of legal consultations, painful conversations and difficult decisions. Thomas moved into my spare bedroom temporarily while he figured out his next steps. Fiona refused to leave their house, claiming he had abandoned her. She alternated between tearful pleas for reconciliation and vicious attacks on his character. 2 days after the confrontation, I received a certified letter from an attorney threatening to sue me for intentional infliction of emotional distress and interference with contractual relations. I forwarded it to my own lawyer without comment. A week later, Thomas filed for separation. The day after that, Fiona emptied their joint bank account. Through it all, I watched my son struggle to come to terms with the deception that had defined his marriage. Some days, he was angry at Fiona, at himself occasionally, even at me for not being more forceful in my concerns about her. Other days he was consumed by doubt, questioning whether he was making the right decision. "Maybe I should try to work it out," he said one evening as we sat on the porch. "Marriage is supposed to be forever, right? Marriage should be based on trust and mutual respect," I replied. "Only you can decide if those things can be rebuilt." He was quiet for a long time after that. The next morning, he called a divorce attorney. The most painful moment came when Fiona began spreading rumors among their mutual friends. According to her, Thomas had cheated on her. I had orchestrated their breakup out of jealousy. We had conspired to leave her destitute. Some believed her. Thomas lost friends he'd had since college. People crossed the street to avoid him in the grocery store. The church they'd attended together asked him to find another congregation until the situation was resolved. "I never knew she could be so vindictive," Thomas said, stunned by the backlash. "When manipulative people lose control, they often lash out," I explained. "They need to rewrite the narrative to make themselves the victim." As painful as it was to watch my son weather these storms, I saw him growing stronger each day, more certain of his decision, more aware of the manipulation tactics that had once blinded him. 1 month after filing for separation, Thomas received a text from Claire. "Stay strong. The truth always comes out eventually." 2 days later, we discovered what she meant. 1 year later, I stood in my garden, pruning roses as the morning sun warmed my shoulders. The past 12 months had been a journey, painful at times, liberating at others, but ultimately healing. The sound of a car pulling into my driveway made me look up. Thomas emerged carrying a small gift bag and wearing a smile that reached his eyes, something I hadn't seen in years. "Happy Mother's Day," he said, embracing me tightly. "You remembered?" I replied, feeling a lump form in my throat. "How could I forget? I made reservations at Giovanni's for noon. I hope that works for you." I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion welling inside me. After everything we'd been through, these simple gestures, a hug, a dinner reservation, his presence, meant more than he could possibly know. We sat on the porch swing, a tradition from his childhood when we'd share popsicles and stories on warm days. "I have news," Thomas said, a hint of nervous excitement in his voice. "The divorce is final." I squeezed his hand. "How do you feel?" He considered the question carefully, relieved, sad that it came to this, but mostly free. The divorce had been messy, as they often are. Fiona had fought every step of the way, demanding the house, alimony, even my continued financial support as part of the settlement. Her claims had been so outrageous that eventually, her own attorney had advised her to be more reasonable. The turning point had come 3 months after Thomas filed for separation. Fiona's friend Melissa, troubled by the vicious lies being spread about Thomas and me, had come forward with screenshots of conversations revealing Fiona's calculated plan to use us financially while systematically isolating Thomas from his family. "She said she targeted you specifically," Melissa had explained, "because she knew you'd help them financially. And she thought you'd be easy to manipulate because you'd do anything for Thomas." With that evidence, the divorce proceedings had shifted dramatically in Thomas's favor. The house was sold, the proceeds split equitably, and Fiona's demands for ongoing support were dismissed. "I have another piece of news," Thomas continued, pulling me from my memories. "I've put an offer on a house. It's small, just a 2-bedroom, but it's mine. Well, mine and the bank's," he added with a self-deprecating laugh. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for him. "Where is it?" "About 15 minutes from here. Close enough for regular visits, but far enough for us both to have our independence." I nodded, appreciating the thoughtfulness behind his decision. Over the past year, we'd both worked hard to rebuild our relationship on healthier foundations. I'd set clear boundaries about financial support, and he'd respected them, working extra hours to save for his down payment instead of asking for my help. "There's something I want you to know," Thomas said, his expression growing serious. "I'm seeing a therapist, have been for a few months now." "That's good," I replied softly. "I'm proud of you for taking that step." He nodded. "It's helping me understand how I got caught in Fiona's manipulation, why I was vulnerable to it." And he hesitated. "How my relationship with you played into it." I tensed slightly, unsure where this was heading. "Not in the way you might think," he clarified quickly. "It's just I always felt like I needed to be perfect for you. To make up for Dad leaving, to justify all your sacrifices." Fiona sensed that insecurity and exploited it. I took a deep breath, feeling my own guilt surface. "I never wanted you to feel that pressure." "I know," he said gently, "but I did. And when Fiona came along and told me I was perfect just as I was, that I deserved everything without having to earn it, it was intoxicating." His honesty both hurt and healed. "I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like you weren't enough," I whispered. "You didn't," he assured me. "But I'm learning that sometimes our perceptions are shaped by things beyond our control, like a child of divorce assuming they need to be perfect to keep their remaining parent from leaving too." We sat in contemplative silence for a moment, the swing creaking softly beneath us. "Anyway," Thomas continued, his tone lightening. "The therapist thinks we're both making good progress, especially since we're talking more openly now." "We are," I agreed. The past year had taught us both to communicate more honestly, to express needs and concerns directly instead of assuming or suppressing them. Thomas reached into the gift bag he'd brought and pulled out a small flat package wrapped in silver paper. "For you," he said. "Open it now." I carefully unwrapped it to find a framed photograph. Thomas and me at his college graduation, both beaming with pride and joy. It was the last photo taken of us before he met Fiona. The last uncomplicated moment of our relationship. "I found it when I was packing," he explained. "Thought you might like to have it." Tears welled in my eyes as I traced the frame with my fingertips. "It's perfect," I managed. Later, as we drove to the restaurant, I reflected on how far we'd come. The painful exclusion from last year's Mother's Day had set in motion a chain of events that, while devastating at the time, had ultimately led to healing and truth. I'd heard through mutual friends that Fiona had moved to another state and was already engaged to a wealthy businessman twice her age. I felt no satisfaction in this news, only a quiet hope that her new fiancé might see through her manipulations before suffering the same fate as Thomas. At the restaurant, Thomas raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, "and to the strongest woman I know." I smiled, clinking my glass against his. "To truth," I added, "and to learning our own worth." As we enjoyed our meal, sharing stories and plans for the future, I realized that what I'd initially seen as an ending, that moment when I tore up the mortgage check and set a boundary, had actually been a beginning. The beginning of reclaiming my voice, my financial independence, and most importantly, my relationship with my son. We both learned valuable lessons. Thomas about recognizing manipulation and valuing genuine relationships. Me about setting healthy boundaries and understanding that true love doesn't require financial sacrifice or silent suffering. The check that I'd canceled a year ago had seemed at the time like a small act of rebellion. In retrospect, it was an act of self-respect that had rippled outward, eventually touching and transforming both our lives. On the drive home, Thomas asked, "Do you ever regret it, canceling that check?" I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. No. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but also one of the most necessary. He nodded thoughtfully. "I think it saved us both." As the sun set behind us, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. We were no longer just mother and son bound by obligation in history, but two adults choosing to be in each other's lives, respecting each other's boundaries, and valuing each other's worth. I had been silenced but never defeated, and in finding my voice again, I had helped my son find his as well.
On my engagement day, as I entered the party, my future mother-in-law blocked my way. And she shouted, "One won't let your plan succeed. You're marrying my son for money." Poor girl, get out of here. My fiancé also supported his mother. As I turned to leave, she yelled, "It again. Stopey, take your farewell gift." Then she threw hot coffee at my face. My face burned. I finally broke my silence, and then my counter-surprise stunned them. "Hello. My name is Sarah Bryant. I am 48 years old, single and proud of it. For the past 2 decades I have led a fulfilling life as the president of a thriving company, focusing on my work and personal growth. Marriage was never a priority for me. I cherished my independence too much to risk it on an uncertain relationship. That all changed one fateful day when Matthew Adams, the head of a well-established business and a longtime professional acquaintance, approached me with a proposal. "Sarah, I'd like you to meet my youngest son Ryan," Matthew said. "He's a good man, kind, thoughtful, and I think you two could be a good match." Out of respect for Matthew, I agreed to meet Ryan. At first he appeared harmless, a bit awkward, immature perhaps, but polite enough. Over the next few months we began dating, and though there were small red flags I brushed them aside. Over the next few weeks Ryan's charm, though sprinkled with immaturity, began to wear me down. His words were sometimes condescending, but I attributed it to his lack of real-world experience. No one is perfect, I told myself. Perhaps he just needed time and patience to mature. 3 months into our relationship, Ryan proposed. "Let's get engaged," he said with a hopeful smile. "We can grow together, Sarah." I hesitated for a moment, but my heart softened. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. With the engagement set, it was time to meet Ryan's family. A formal introduction to the people who would soon become part of my life. I knew it would be a challenge. After all, a businesswoman in her late 40s doesn't exactly fit the traditional mold of a bride-to-be. I spent hours preparing for the visit, ensuring everything about me reflected class and confidence. My hair was styled to perfection, my clothes carefully chosen, and my demeanor calm and professional. I was ready, or so I thought. The day arrived. Ryan picked me up and drove me to his family's home. His demeanor was unusually quiet, almost nervous, but I chose to overlook it. As we entered the Adams' lavish living room, I smiled warmly and extended my hand to greet his mother, Megan. What happened next was something I could never have anticipated. Megan stood in the center of the room, eyeing me from head to toe with an expression I couldn't quite place, part curiosity, part disdain. The handshake I offered was left hanging in the air, ignored as she folded her arms tightly across her chest. "So you're Sarah Bryant," she finally said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I've heard a lot about you." "Thank you, Mrs. Adams," I replied politely, refusing to react to her obvious lack of warmth. Ryan stood to the side, his hands buried in his pockets, saying nothing. His silence was noticeable, but I chose to focus on making a good impression. We sat down, and Megan began her interrogation almost immediately. "Sarah, Ryan tells me you run a business," she said, forcing a smile. "That's unconventional for a woman, isn't it?" I returned her smile calmly. "It's been my passion for over 2 decades, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished." Her forced grin faltered, replaced by a sneer. "Well, I suppose when one comes from humble beginnings they have no choice but to work." The implication was clear. I took a deep breath, studying myself. "Hard work has always been a point of pride for me, Mrs. Adams. It teaches discipline and independence." Megan laughed lightly, as though I'd said something amusing. "Independence? Oh, I see." She leaned forward slightly. "But don't you think independence is overrated, especially at your age? Women are meant to create families, not companies." My heart began to pound, but I maintained my composure. I had dealt with tough business negotiations before. This was no different. Ryan, however, remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. That silence hurt more than I was willing to admit. Megan continued, her voice growing sharper. "You know, Sarah, Ryan deserves someone who can uphold our family's reputation. People are already talking about this match, wondering what kind of woman doesn't marry until she's pushing 50. I was stunned. Before I could respond, she delivered her final blow. "With parents like yours, you'll drag our family name into the dirt. Don't expect us to accept you." The room went silent. My hands tightened into fists at my sides as her words hung heavily in the air. Ryan smirked. Not a word of defense, no attempt to stop his mother. His complicity was louder than her insults. Megan wasn't done. She picked up the steaming cup of coffee in front of her, the smug look on her face, a clear warning. "Consider this your farewell gift," she said, and before I could react, she hurled the coffee straight at me. The cup clattered to the floor as the hot liquid splashed across my face, soaking my clothes and stinging my skin. I gasped, stunned, the shock rendering me momentarily speechless. Ryan's laughter filled the room, sharp, mocking, and cruel. "That's enough." Mr. Adams's voice thundered from across the room, but it was too late. Slowly I wiped the coffee from my face with the back of my hand. My expensive blouse was ruined, the humiliation searing deeper than the liquid. But I refused to give Megan or Ryan the satisfaction of seeing me defeated. Calmly I stood up. "Thank you for showing me exactly what kind of family I was about to marry into," I said, my voice steady and strong. "I'll save you the trouble of dragging your name into the dirt. This engagement is over." Megan's smirk disappeared in an instant. Ryan's laughter cut off abruptly, his face paling. "What? Sarah, wait," Ryan stammered, finally finding his voice, but it was far too late. I turned to Mr. Adams. "Thank you for your cooperation in our business dealings over the years, Mr. Adams. I'll have my team contact yours to discuss any next steps." Without another word, I walked out of the room, leaving behind the echoes of their stunned silence. As I walked out of the Adams house, my heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, each step echoing in the quiet hallway. My face and clothes were still damp from the coffee, but I refused to let it break my resolve. I had dealt with far worse challenges in my career. This was just another test of character. Behind me I could hear Megan's indignant voice rising in protest. "How dare she?" she screeched. "Ryan, go after her. Fix this." But Ryan, true to form, did nothing. His silence was his answer. He would never stand up for me. The drive back was quiet. I sat in the back of the car Ryan had arranged earlier, staring out the window, lost in thought. My reflection in the glass revealed the coffee stains marring my blouse and the slight redness on my cheek from where the liquid had splashed. How did I let it get this far? I wondered, shaking my head at my own lapse in judgment. At first Ryan had seemed harmless, maybe even endearing. His lack of maturity, his awkward attempts to impress me, I had dismissed them as quirks of a sheltered man. I told myself that patience could fix his flaws, that with time he might grow into a better partner. But the events of today were a wake-up call. As the car approached my home, I replayed the scene in my mind. Megan's cruel insults about my family, Ryan's smirk, his refusal to defend me, the hot coffee dripping down my face. I thought back to the way Megan mocked my parents, belittling their background and implying I was unworthy. My parents may not have been wealthy, but they were good, honest people who raised me with love and integrity. That was more valuable than all the wealth in the world. Ryan's laughter hurt the most. He could have stopped his mother. He could have defended me. Instead, he joined in her cruelty, exposing his true nature. I realized then that this wasn't just about Megan. Ryan was part of the problem, and I could no longer pretend otherwise. This engagement isn't just over, I said to myself quietly. It never should have happened in the first place. When I finally stepped into my home, I went straight to my room, peeled off my ruined blouse, and tossed it in the laundry hamper. The mirror reflected a woman who had just walked through fire and come out stronger. I washed my face, removing every last trace of the coffee, and took a deep breath. This wasn't a loss. It was a victory. I had escaped a toxic family and an unworthy partner before it was too late. I sat on my couch with a glass of water and picked up my phone. A message from Ryan blinked on the screen. "Sarah, my mom didn't mean it. Let's talk, please." I stared at the words, shaking my head. There was nothing left to say. With one final tap, I blocked his number. The morning after the disastrous meeting at the Adams house, I arrived at my office with a renewed sense of purpose. My assistant glanced up, noticing the determined expression on my face. "Everything okay, Miss Bryant?" she asked cautiously. "Never better," I replied, setting my bag down. I had a plan to deal with the Adams family, not out of spite, but to ensure they faced the consequences of their actions. As the president of a thriving company, I didn't rise to where I was by letting people walk over me. Megan and Ryan had crossed a line, and it was time they learned what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. I drafted a formal letter to Matthew Adams' company, clear, concise, and professional, stating my decision to reevaluate and temporarily suspend all business contracts. The letter cited increasing concerns over leadership integrity and reliability as the reason. I ensured the wording was airtight, leaving no room for negotiation. Once I signed the letter, I handed it to my assistant. "Have this sent over immediately." She nodded, but curiosity flickered in her eyes. "Will this hurt their company?" "Not intentionally," I replied calmly. "But they need to learn that actions have consequences. I won't partner with anyone I can't trust." That evening my phone rang. The caller ID read Matthew Adams. I picked up, expecting his call. His voice trembled with desperation. "Sarah, please, you don't understand what you've done. This will destroy us." "I understand perfectly, Mr. Adams," I replied coldly. "I gave your family trust and respect, and in return, I was humiliated. That coffee your wife threw at me wasn't just liquid. It was a symbol of your family's arrogance and entitlement," Matthew stammered, searching for words. "But our company, our employees, your family's actions brought this upon themselves," I said firmly. "I've made my decision. There's nothing more to discuss." I hung up the phone, knowing full well what would happen next. Over the next few weeks, news of Adams Enterprises' collapse spread like wildfire. Investors pulled out. The loss of my company's partnership revealed their deep financial troubles, leading to plummeting investor confidence. Suppliers withdrew support. With debts piling up, Adams Enterprises struggled to pay suppliers, causing delays and further losses. Employee layoffs. As the company bled money, layoffs began, leaving employees scrambling for jobs. The media began reporting the downfall in brutal headlines. Adams Enterprises on the brink of collapse after losing key partnership, greed and mismanagement topple a family business empire. Megan and Ryan became the faces of failure. Reporters hounded them, demanding answers. Megan, once so proud and arrogant, now hid from cameras, while Ryan's smug demeanor was replaced with panic. Unable to accept their failure, Megan and Ryan stewed in bitterness. In their eyes, I was the villain, the one who had brought down their empire. "They'll pay for this," Megan reportedly told a close friend. "We'll make sure of it." Their desperation grew, and I had no idea what they were planning next. A month after the collapse of Adams Enterprises, I was certain that chapter of my life had closed. My company was thriving, and the Adams family had reaped what they had sown. But just when I thought it was over, the storm returned. It was a quiet Monday morning when Amanda walked into my office, holding a thick envelope with a look of concern on her face. "This came for you, Miss Bryant," she said softly. I frowned, taking the envelope and tearing it open. My stomach sank as I read the first few lines. Plaintiffs Megan Adams and Ryan Adams allege that Sarah Bryant deliberately sabotaged Adams Enterprises, resulting in financial ruin. A lawsuit has been filed demanding compensation for damages. I placed the document on my desk, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "Unbelievable," I muttered. "They're trying to pin their failure on me." Amanda watched me anxiously. "What do you want to do?" I straightened in my chair, my resolve hardening. "Call Evelyn Moore. Tell her I need to see her immediately." By afternoon, I was sitting across from Evelyn Moore, my sharp and dependable lawyer. She scanned the lawsuit, her brow furrowing in irritation. "This is outrageous," she said, tossing the papers onto the table. "They're claiming you intentionally sabotaged their company to ruin them." "They're desperate," I replied calmly. They can't accept that their failure was their own doing, so they're trying to drag me down with them. Evelyn leaned back, a smirk playing on her lips. They've underestimated us again. We'll not only prove their case is baseless but we'll expose everything, their lies, their financial fraud, and their incompetence. What's our strategy? I asked. First, we'll file a countersuit for defamation and damages to your reputation. Then we'll gather every piece of evidence to dismantle their case and show the court the truth. I nodded. Let's do it. I won't let them destroy what I've built. Within days, news of the lawsuit exploded across media outlets. The Addams family, desperate for sympathy, gave interviews, painting themselves as victims of my supposed vengeance. Meghan appeared on television, her face carefully composed to appear broken and betrayed. She wanted to destroy us. Meghan sniffled, tears in her voice. We gave her our trust and she turned it against us. It was a performance worthy of an award, but I wasn't worried. Behind the scenes, Evelyn and my legal team were gathering evidence, a mountain of undeniable proof that the Addams family's downfall had nothing to do with me. In the weeks leading up to the trial, we uncovered the following. Financial fraud, records proving that Meghan and Ryan had siphoned funds from Addams Enterprises into personal accounts to maintain their lifestyle. Mismanagement, evidence of reckless decisions that had put the company into financial ruin long before my partnership ended. False claims, documentation showing my company had fulfilled every obligation in our contract with Addams Enterprises. This lawsuit is a desperate attempt to deflect blame, Evelyn said during our final strategy meeting. We'll expose every lie in court. I nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and resolve. It's time to end this for good. The day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed, with reporters eagerly waiting to see how the case would unfold. I sat calmly at my table, Evelyn beside me, while Meghan and Ryan sat across the room, their faces etched with forced confidence. The proceedings began, and Meghan's lawyer stood up to present their case. Sarah Bryant maliciously terminated her partnership with Addams Enterprises, deliberately causing its collapse out of personal spite. Meghan dabbed her eyes with a tissue for dramatic effect, while Ryan avoided looking in my direction. Then it was Evelyn's turn. She rose to her feet, her voice sharp and commanding. Your Honor, the claims made by the plaintiffs are not only false, but deliberately fabricated to deflect blame for their own failures. We will present clear evidence that Addams Enterprises' financial collapse was due to internal fraud and mismanagement, not my client's actions. One by one, Evelyn presented the evidence. Bank statements showing funds funneled into Meghan and Ryan's personal accounts. Internal emails and records proving poor financial decisions made months before the partnership ended. My company's records showing I fulfilled every term of our agreement. The courtroom watched as Evelyn systematically dismantled the Addams family's claims. Meghan's confident facade began to crack, and Ryan sat frozen, realizing the truth was laid bare for everyone to see. When Evelyn finished, the judge turned to Meghan and Ryan. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Meghan stammered, her voice weak. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Ryan simply looked down, too ashamed to speak. After a brief recess, the judge returned with his ruling. The evidence clearly shows that the plaintiffs, Meghan Addams and Ryan Addams, filed false claims against the defendant, Sarah Bryant, in an attempt to shift blame for their own failures. The court finds the plaintiffs guilty of defamation, perjury, and corporate fraud. The judge delivered the punishment. Meghan and Ryan were ordered to pay damages to compensate for the harm done to my reputation. Both were sentenced to prison time for fraud and perjury. The courtroom erupted with whispers as Meghan and Ryan were led away. Meghan screamed, "This isn't fair," while Ryan followed silently, his face pale and defeated. As I walked out of the courtroom, the weight that had lingered on my shoulders for weeks finally lifted. The Addams family had been exposed for who they truly were, fraudulent, arrogant, and entitled. Justice had been served, and the world now knew the truth. Evelyn walked beside me, her expression one of quiet triumph. They underestimated you, Sarah, she said with a smirk. And look where it got them. I smiled faintly. They played a dangerous game, and they lost. This was never about revenge. It was about defending what's rightfully mine. News of the trial spread like wildfire. Media outlets published headlines that made the Addams family's downfall unavoidable. Meghan and Ryan Addams exposed lies, fraud, and humiliation in courtroom drama. Addams Enterprises' final fall. Greed and mismanagement lead to ruin. Meghan Addams began her 3-year sentence for fraud and perjury. Ryan Addams, sentenced to 2 years, spent his days behind bars reflecting on his downfall. The damages awarded to my company wiped out whatever wealth the Addams family had left. Their mansion and assets were seized to pay off debts, leaving Meghan and Ryan with nothing. Meghan, once the picture of arrogance, became a symbol of failure and greed. Ryan was abandoned by the few friends he had left, his name now synonymous with shame. Matthew Addams, who had stayed out of the courtroom drama, quietly sold off the remnants of Addams Enterprises. He retired in disgrace, leaving behind the empire he had once proudly built. In the weeks following the trial, my company soared to greater heights. The lawsuit had been a test, but it proved my integrity and strength to everyone watching. Clients and business partners praised me for standing up to injustice. My reputation, far from being damaged, emerged stronger than ever. At a celebration dinner held by my team, Amanda raised a toast to Sarah Bryant, our fearless leader. May no one ever doubt her strength again. Laughter and applause filled the room as I smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. I had stood my ground, and I had won. Months passed, and word trickled in about Meghan and Ryan's lives post-trial. Meghan, once so proud and condescending, was now a forgotten figure. After serving her sentence, she moved into a rundown apartment, abandoned by everyone she had once flaunted her wealth to. Ryan, having lost his cushy life, struggled to adapt to reality. No one wanted to hire a disgraced man who had been convicted of fraud. I never wished harm upon them, but their fate was of their own making. They had tried to destroy me, and instead they destroyed themselves. One evening I stood on my balcony with a cup of tea, looking out over the city skyline. The air was cool, and for the first time in months I felt peace. True, unshakable peace. This journey had taught me many things. Never compromise your dignity for anyone. Always stand up for yourself, even when the world doubts you. Happiness, I realized, isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build for yourself day by day. I turned to head back inside, my phone buzzing with a new email, a proposal for a partnership from a major international company. Life was moving forward, and I was ready for it. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. What would you have done if you were in Sarah's shoes? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the notification bell, so you never miss a new story. Until next time, remember, stand tall, fight back, and never let anyone take away your dignity.